When it comes to political groups right now, there's actually a lot more than just like the two or three people like to lift off. And there's one in particular I've consistently said. I don't know if I said it on the channel before, but I've said there is one group in particular that is seriously the source of a lot of these problems of not being able to get anything done. And so you have a lot of different groups. It's very nuanced. There's a lot of overlap. So if you wanted to say you have the moderates as the middle, then you would say on the right you would have conservatives, Republicans, you have Trumpers, you'd have the far right, which is a bunch of different factions of far right that don't really like each other that much, to be honest. And then you'd go over to the left and you'd have the like 90s liberals, like the standard old school Democrats. You'd have the far left, like the socialists. You'd have the libertarian socialists, the authoritarian socialists, the tanky type communists. And then you have the worst group that causes most of a lot of the problems when it comes to communication, which is the neolibs. And when it comes to the neolibs, you can pretty much lump in the neocons too, as almost the same in a way. There are distinctions, but I've always held the position that the neolibs are really the worst when it comes to a lot of problem in the country. Because what they do is, if you had two people trying to talk to each other, so if you had two people trying to talk to each other, and you're listening to the two people talk, they would be like a stadium crowd behind you of just incoherent screeching. So you can't actually hear what's going on. So if you want an example of like a neolib in like government, you would have like the Democratic establishment. Or as far leftists would call them, you call them the shitlibs, right? So you'd have like your Nancy Pelosi types, right? They'll say they're progressive, they're not progressive. If you want to take those, you have the college white women, right? Who will say like they're pro everything you can imagine and that they're a socialist, and they can't define any of what that means. Now, looping back to what does this have to do with the Bank of America thing? This reeks of white women neoliberal nonsense. Because when I read through this, I was like, this is progressive word vomit. And I don't know what the hell they're talking about. And it's especially rich coming from Bank of America because, they're the ones fighting systemic injustice, but they're not going to bring up that they caused a lot of it over the past couple decades. So when I read this, this reads like another example of a neolib type action would be the white woman, because neolibs are mostly white women, who come out and will put a big BLM sign in their yard. That is not for support of any black person. That sign is for their neighbor, because all neolibs care about is looking good to other, it's like white women wanting to look good to other white women. These are the people who screeched kids in cages for 4 years and stopped the wall for 4 years, and then as soon as Biden's in and doing it, they don't say anything. So I want to look at this, and I want to show you what I mean by the fact that you have these shitlibs who are such a large faction, and that they vomit these incoherent ideas out into a group just to look good for, again, other neolibs, and how you can't really have a conversation about anything as long as you have these people around. So, this headline, Toddlers Are Racist and Other Insights from Bank of America's Woke Training. This headline is dishonest. I'm going to say this right now. I read this. It doesn't say anywhere toddlers are racist. It brought up like young kids can recognize race differences at like 3 or 4. That's not saying toddlers are racist. Anyway, so Bank of America has implemented racial re-education program that claims the United States is a system of white supremacy and encourage employees to become woke at work, instructing white employees in particular to decolonize your mind and secede powers to people of color. Again, I don't know what the fuck people of color means. I'm sick of this fucking term. If you mean black people, say black people. Otherwise, I don't know what the hell that means. Right? I'm with Ice Cube when someone tried to pull the people of color on him, and he said, I don't give a fuck about people of color. I care about black people. That's what I mean. And let's be honest. Is Bank of America willing to give up their institutional power to, are they going to lead by example and give up their institutional power to, say, a black community to run their bank? I don't think that's going to happen. Let's be honest. This is to look good to other white liberals, white neolibs, right? I'm not going to see Bank of America going, Let's head to the black communities and let's show them how to start their own bank and show them how to, show them those things. Like, let's put in programs to do that. They're not going to do that. This is to go, look at us, we're so progressive. So like I said, you'll go on, you'll see, this is just word vomit. This year, Bank of America executive Charles Bowman announced a new equity initiative called United in Action in partnership with the United Way of Carolinians. According to documents I have reviewed, Bank of America executives launched the initiative by encouraging employees to participate in 21-day race training challenge, funded in part by the bank, built on the principles of critical race theory. So when it comes to CRT, a lot of the time the right never likes to define CRT. I noticed that. So I understand it. So you basically have the people that go, it's a college level theory. So you're just going to talk about the intersection of, race and law and institution in the history of America. I get that, right? But then you'll get these people that'll go, I'm going to teach this. And then you look at what these teachers teach people. One, why are we teaching college theories in elementary school? I don't know. That's something else. But you look at what they're teaching, and there's so much like fuck whitey, get whitey in there. And I'm like, what is this? Right? And then they'll claim they're teaching, we're just teaching the history. Like, I look at these people that go, they're teaching the history of racism in America. And then I look at what they teach. They're not teaching the actual history of racism in America. A lot of them are teaching this fuck whitey, get whitey stuff, which is absolutely no. What the hell are you guys doing? And again, when you look at the teachers, who are the teachers overwhelmingly? It's white women. Anyway, that was just quick side note. Anyway, so on the program's first day, Bank of America teaches employees that the United States is a racialized society. Well, that's true. That uses race to establish and justify systems of power, disenfranchisement, and oppression. Half true. Disenfranchisement, absolutely. That's a complicated subject. That would be a whole video. But what I meant by it's progressive word vomit is you can pull out parts that are like true, and then the rest of this is like, I don't know what any of this means. What the hell are you talking about? So according to the training program, all whites, regardless of socioeconomic class or background or other disadvantages, are living a life with white skin privilege. Even children implicated in the systems of white supremacy. According to the program materials, white toddlers develop racial biases by ages 3 to 5. They'd be actively taught to recognize and reject the smog of white privilege. Okay. What does this have to do with a fucking bank? Besides that statement just being essentially neoliberal word vomit, what does this have to do with banking, and how are the bankers going to implement anything that does anything about what they propose anyway? Bank of America is not going to do anything about this. This is a virtue signal. So, one, they don't want to get sued by some, they're going to have, some diversity hire who's going to get offended at something, and they just want to cover their bases so they don't get sued. And two, this is mostly to make them feel good. The next 3 days, Bank of America immerses employees in full-spectrum CRT. I don't know what that means, New York Post. You're going to have to define that. I do not know why the right will never clearly define CRT. It's very annoying. At least not framing all white people as oppressive and all racial minorities as irreproachable. Racism America idolizes white physical features and white values as supreme over those of others. Okay, and this is where I go into, again, this is where vomit. So this is what I was talking about by framing all white people as oppressors and racial minorities. It's irreproachable. This is the fuck whitey stuff. I don't like this. Why are you teaching? This is not going to help race relations at all. All right, race relations are already hard enough to talk about, where you'll have the left just scream incoherently, and the right doesn't even want to talk about race, which is stupid. But on top of it, you throw in things like this: all white people are the problem. All black people are that. Don't do this. If you want to attack the system, attack the system. Approaching people in this method is to make sure that everybody is hostile towards each other. Right? It doesn't sit there and go, let's solve the problems of race relation. It goes, let's get angry at white people, cause racial divisions and tension, and then race relations are going to get worse. But then the race trainers, like these trainers who come in, the diversity sensitivity trainers who come in, make a fuck ton of money, and that's the purpose. If we strain race relations and make them worse, we make money. We're not going to select a bank that has insane amounts of institutional power, looking at what Bank of America did in 2008, could actually do something to make a difference. They're not going to actually do it. They're just going to run their mouths about how much they hate white people by white people, so they can go to other white people and go, look, white people, see? We suck. Aren't we good? We're such good leftists, right, black people? We care about you so much. Then I have a problem with this. This is where I go into it's sort of like a word salad where you have some things where you go, racism in America idolizes white physical features. That is true. Maybe I should make a video on that, break that down. I still got reading to do, but I should break that down. But, okay, that part is true. But then when you say white values, I don't know what white values means. You mean Judeo-Christian values? Because black people, we have those same values. Those are not white values. Christian values are not white values, right? This right here, that Christian values are white values, is a concept that comes from white people. Hey, you should see some of the white ignorance go off when you tell them Jesus wasn't white. And that most people in the Bible were not white. That's why I said this is neo-lib pseudoscience nonsense. It says, as a result of being part of the dominant culture, whites are more likely to have a limited imagination, experience fear, anxiety, guilt, or shame, or contribute to racial tension, hatred, and violence, and react in broken ways. See, that's just vomit. I don't know what any of that means. This is where Rufo should have actually, I wish he had some papers to show if I could read it. Based off this is word vomit. I don't know what any of that means. Contribute to racial tensions in what ways? Because what I'm reading is this is contributing to racial tensions. The right and the left are guilty of this. I always said, if you brought a conservative and a liberal into a room and sat them down and said, we're going to talk about race relations in America, the liberal would start screaming incoherently and the conservative would just walk out of the room. They're both the problem. One spouts nonsense, the other doesn't even want to hear it. Right, here we go. People of color, on the other hand, I, again, don't know what that means. Can't be racist because racism is used to justify the position of the dominant group and uphold white supremacy and superiority. Therefore, the discussion guide claims that reverse racism and discrimination are not possible. This definition, I always hear this, the black people can't be racist. My problem when they give that definition of racism, of the power and privilege, everything, is usually what they're describing as systemic racism, which is a different thing. So if you want to argue black people cannot be systemically racist because they do not control the systems of power, that's fine. I got no problem with that statement. That's true. If you want to change the definition of racist about superiority and inferiority, no. A lot of times, not everybody, but a lot of people do it because they hold some fucked up beliefs and they're kind of they feel guilty about it. But anyway, I've never liked the merger of those two definitions into this interchangeable thing. I always thought that was kind of a weird semantic game, I should say. On days 5 and 6, the banking giant encourages white employees to confront their white privilege and white fragility to discover where they are on a privilege spectrum as part of the program. Oh my god, those privilege tests, I've seen those and I've taken some of them. The problem with those is they ask you loaded questions. So if they'll do, say, here's a white privilege test, the higher you score, the more privilege you have. Or not white privilege, but a privilege test, right? And I'll look at the questions, and they'll go, +1 if this applies to you, -1 if this doesn't. I've always read the questions, and they're very loaded questions to make sure white people are always up and black people are always down. So I've never liked these privilege tests. They never try to ask questions based on, like, demographics and data. They always try to ask, like, these really odd questions. Like, I remember one I got is, for makeup, it was makeup and it was like band-aids, and it was like, my area is likely to not have my skin tone. And it wasn't accounting for, like, demographics and region. And I was like, well, yeah, that's a loaded question. Well, maybe that's not the word, but you get what I mean. I'm like, well, that depends on where you live. So I really wish he actually got the paper for this, because I'd love to read these. As part of the program, Bank of America employees take a series of diagnostic tests in which they assess their racial and sexual identities. Oh god, I really wish I could take that. Check a series of boxes to identify their white privilege and probe racist attitudes that can contribute to their white fragility. I always hated that concept of white fragility. It was always really stupid. A lot of times when I would hear it argued, it was usually thrown out at a person because they couldn't refute the other side, or because they denied an accusation. So I never liked the term. It always seemed as a way to go like, you're denying my claim, so I'm going to claim that you do believe in my claim while simultaneously smearing you, and if you argue against it, you're proving me right. That's usually how I've seen that term be used, so I really absolutely hate that term. Because like I said, all this stuff was all made on purpose, right? If we muddy up the conversation on race relations and the history of racism and all this other stuff in America, if we muddy it up to a bunch of nonsensical pseudoscience, we can just argue about nothing, so the problems will never get solved and everything will stay the same. The same thing I bring up on the reparations debate. I always will bring up. They'll bring some dumb idiot who sits there and goes, we should get like a check because like we were discriminated against in the past. And then they'll get some idiot on the other side who goes, that is a welfare handout and get over it. And that was a long time ago. And nobody comes bringing the actual argument. That's the point. It's the same idea. They do this with everything. It's so we can't have an actual discussion. In days 7 through 16, Bank of America covers a laundry list of progressive concepts and policy priorities, including, oh god, microaggressions, racial trauma, the abolishment of police, the school-to-prison pipeline, and environmental justice. I don't know what the fuck environmental justice has to do with solving race relations. And what that has to do with CRT, but okay. The training program claims that the racist microaggressions can contribute to post-traumatic stress disorder in Black Americans. Racism can be just as devastating or as gunfire sexual assault. This reeks of white women. This reeks of white women. It's almost like, remember when the right tried to smear the book Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome? I'm like halfway through it. It's really good. And the right tried to smear it by using this argument. And in the book, this argument is never made. It's never made that the concept of that trauma being passed down like somehow inherently mentally, it was more so about learned behaviors. Your brain, when you get old, you tend to not be able to change your mind out of your old ways because your brain's like, this is what helped me survive. And then you pass that down to your kids, and then they learn it, and then you pass it down to their kids. It's about that. And then I saw the right and the left boil it down into like curing a microaggression. Like, see, this is why I said it reeks of white women. Like, if you think we're so sensitive that hearing, can I touch your hair, which as somebody with massive hair, and hears that from white women a lot, at least I used to until this started happening, that does not, the fact that you think that would anger or traumatize us, or say, you're well-spoken, right? We know that's racist, but to think that that's as traumatizing as gunfire to us, that is insulting. But like I said, these are usually white, female, neoliberal types who see us as basically their little accessories to go, look how progressive I am. Now, some just don't know better, and that's fair. There was a girl who was, who I remember it was at this like BLM meeting, and she felt scared of asking a Black person to touch their hair because she was afraid that would like upset them or traumatize them. And I was nice to her, and I was like, she didn't know any better. I just thought, don't treat us like that. We're not children. If we don't like it, we'll say no. And I'm going to say, as a white woman, no Black person ever said, no Black man ever said no to a white woman walking up and saying, can I touch you? Unless the police were around, then, you know, maybe that's a different story. But that's a thing. Don't make a mockery of what we've been through, okay? To the point we're so sensitive that words will do that, okay? We don't need more young Black men becoming weak and crying because someone called them a nigga and running to the principal and, you know, crying their eyes out, right? Because, look, I got sent to a school out of my neighborhood. I got sent to a white school. I got called a nigga once, didn't do anything. I got called a nigga again. I smashed a dude's head in the locker. No one ever called me a nigga again. I wasn't traumatized or scared. Sorry, that was a long tangent, but you get what I mean. America's economy is described as a caste system. Partially true. Yeah, you could say that's true. African Americans kept exploited and geographically separate. Economically, we have and are still being exploited. So you see, that part is true. That's why I said it's like vomit. You can pull out parts that are true. But the rest of it is just thrown in and sandwiched with a bunch of stuff that makes no sense. The American policing system, and according to the materials, was founded on slave patrols whose task it was to capture, control, and brutalize enslaved people. Historical falsehood. Yes, because the modern police were come from the concept of it was like the Royal Guard in Britain. If you want to talk about slavery origins and policing, that's where the Star Badge comes from. You know how a lot of police still have the Star Badge? The Star Badge was to mark slave catchers. So that part is, that's why I said it's like a half truth. Some of the symbols we used were for slave catchers, although most police switched to the shield. This system is woven into the DNA of US society, and according to the activists, the training module can be solved through defunding or even the abolishment of police. See, this is where I go, I'm sorry, I really wish he had the paper, because I was like, this is where it also reeks of white women again. This is coming from Bank of America. So they're not going to bring up redlining. They're not going to bring up blockbusting. They're going to put this all on the police. Now, I could fuck the police, all right? Because, I mean, basically, they become domestic terrorists at this point. My problem with a lot of the abolish the police people is it's usually white suburban kids who will also, because, again, they have to look good for their other little neo-lib friends, have to say, oh, we need to ban assault weapons. We need to ban this gun. We need all this gun control. And then they say abolish the police. And then I'll tell them, you don't care about black lives. And then they act all offended. And I'm like, look, if you want to yeet the police, you got to give us everything. That's fine. You got to let us have access to anything we want. But then they'll say no, but also defund the police. I'm like, okay, so then we're screwed because of the gangs then. But they won't talk about that. At that point, they'll just stop talking to you or block you. Right? Because it's about looking good. This is why I said, how is abolishing the police going to solve things like redlining, blockbusting, you know, and not even get into the cultural things like cultural depictions that are still, you know, relevant, that's still things like racial socialization that are still happening. How is the fucking getting rid of police going to stop things like that? This is why I said it's virtue signaling nonsense. And then the rest of it, they just say, you know, we need to be woke at work, which is really on the nose. So it's kind of weird. And then building their concede power to people of color, which that doesn't mean anything. You're not going to see the president like resigning or going, hey, we're going to move we're going to move a bunch of Bank of America locations to black communities and allow them to be run by the black community or anything like that. You're not going to see him do that, right? This is just to, look, other white people, look how good we are. Give us your money. Yes, if we really want to actually start having conversations about solutions to things like race relations in America, we can't. This neo-lib nonsense has got to go. Because all they do is muddy up the conversation. They give red meat to the right. They give straw men to the right to attack and dismantle. Then they come back and they'll just start arguing against straw men with their own straw men, and then everything gets muddied up. So we get it, Bank of America. You want to be one of the good white people. While not doing anything to solve the problems you created. And not even just in the black community. You screwed over all your American people. And now you're trying to look woke for everybody, and it's adorable. Anyway, okay. This is taking too long. Stay safe, don't get shot. You know how it be.